Hello, I'm Sierra Scott. Welcome to It's All Good. This is a show dedicated to people, places, companies, and organizations that are working hard to make the world a better place to live. My mother had some sayings that have stuck with me pretty much all my life. One of them is, you always find time to do the things you really want to do. 2, you can do anything you put your mind to. And 3, age is just a number. I know they're all true, but I've never met anyone who is living proof of all 3 at the same time, at least not until now. Diane Palmer is a perfect example of the fact that you're never too old to live your dreams.
You can see the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro. That's where we will be climbing to starting tomorrow night at midnight.
I started thinking about Kilimanjaro doing the climb about 2 years ago.
At that time, she added it to her version of a bucket list.
I put a vision board together on things that I want to accomplish in the next several years. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to visit Africa. And so I put that on my vision board, and I sponsor a child in Kenya. So I took a picture of her name is JC, and I put that on the vision board. And then I saw an article about Mount Kilimanjaro, and I read it, and I thought, this is interesting. This is something maybe I could do.
But like a lot of us, she thought about it, but kept putting it off until finally a landmark date was looming over the horizon.
And my 65th birthday was approaching in October. And I thought, if I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I need to make a decision soon.
But Diane realized she needed a little extra push to make it happen.
And then I thought, if I'm going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, I have to do it for more of a purpose than just a challenge, a physical challenge. And so I decided to do it as a fundraiser for charities and missions in Africa that I am familiar with.
To make it even more compelling, she did her research and came up with 5 organizations that helped African children that also had roots in Kansas.
One is the Adoras, and the Adora Sisters of the Blood of Christ started Newman University, and many years ago it was called Sacred Heart Academy and Sacred Heart University, and they have a wonderful mission that is in Tanzania.
Another group she donated to was the St. Joseph Sisters, a group that started St. Joseph Hospital. They too are providing help to children in Tanzania. Diane also donated to the agency in Kenya through which she sponsors a child called the Christian Foundation for Children and Aging.
And the people who started that are actually from Pittsburgh, Kansas, and the organization is out of Kansas City, Kansas.
Some of the money also went to the Dominican Sisters in Nigeria, who had also been educators and healthcare providers here in Kansas.
They taught me grades 1 through 8 in the little village that I grew up nearby in Willowdale, Kansas. And they have a mission called the Hope for the Village Child. And they work with children and women and families in rural areas, immunization, things for children, maternity and prenatal care for women. They've helped women start small businesses.
And finally, she gave support to the BBM Sisters of Charity in Ghana.
And they started Mount Carmel Academy. And when I went to Mount Carmel, the sister that I visited at the Ghana Mission, which is a library and literacy center in Kumasi, Ghana, she was actually at Mount Carmel. It was her first year teaching when I was a freshman in high school.
That was back in 1959. Amazing, isn't it? Even halfway across the world, there are only a few degrees of separation. So now she had a goal, she had a purpose, and she had the mental mindset. The next step was the most difficult, though, getting physically ready to do it. Mount Kilimanjaro is not an easy climb. At 19,340 feet, hikers go through 5 different temperate zones during the trek, and it takes 7 days to make the hike. The first thing Diane did was head to Cessna Stadium at WSU to prepare her legs for the climb.
It involved a lot of running up and down the steps.
The first time Diane tried climbing the stairs, she was only able to make it up and down 5 times. If you've ever tried walking the stairs at Cessna Stadium, you know what a feat that really is.
Walking up the benches was really good, and then going around the track and just using the track as a walking space to go around, which was wonderful. And I got to the point where I did 14,500 steps in one day, and then I did about 4 or 5 miles around the track. took me about 6 hours to do. When I finished that, I thought I would be ready to do the climb to Mount Kilimanjaro, because you have to do somewhere between 5 and 8 hours worth of hiking all at one time.
But is anyone ever really ready to make a climb like that? Did I mention that Diane had never climbed a mountain before? Was there a point that you're working on this thinking, am I crazy? What am I doing?
Yes, there was a point. But every time it would get a little hard in the training process, I would think of, why am I doing this? And then I would revert back to, I'm doing it for the children of Africa. And, if you can help one child at a time was my whole purpose. And if I can help the missions in their wonderful work that they're doing in Africa, that's what it was all about. It became not, I wouldn't say easy, but easier.
Coming up after the break, we'll tell you what obstacles she encountered once she got there. You're watching It's All Good. After months of training and an 18-hour flight, Diane Palmer finally found herself at the bottom of Kilimanjaro. Finally, her goal, her dream, her vision had become a reality.
The only time in the climb that I was a little fearful was about the 5th day, and we were in an area that's called the Barranco Wall, and it is steep, and it is a wall that you have to climb around, and there is no real true path. So you're putting your feet into different places into the rock and climbing around it, and so it's pretty arduous. And if you slip, well, you slip. There is no return. You have no ropes. You have nobody holding on to you. You just hold on to the rocks with your hands. So that was the only time I was a little fearful.
I'll bet. At 65, surprisingly, Diane was not the oldest one making the trip.
I was the second oldest in the group. We were 6 in our group. The youngest was in his 30s, then we had somebody in their 40s, we had somebody in their 50s, I was in the 60s, and then Bob Liebel, who trained with me out at WSU and then decided at the last minute that he was actually going to do the trip, he turned 72 about a day before we went up the mountain.
As we told you earlier in the story, the journey took these climbers through 5 different temperate zones, which means they had to take a lot of different types of clothing along. Diane says experiencing that in person was more than she bargained for.
To start in the rainforest, and then every day we were going through a different temperate zone. And it's like going from the Sahara Desert to Antarctica. So each day was different. The climate was different, and what we were seeing that was different. So being there was more than I had expected. To see the scenery was more than I expected.
And then we descended to 13,200 feet. That's where we're at right now. And we're going to spend the night here.
The scenery at the top was the best part of all.
This is the highest peak in Africa. This is the roof of Africa we are at.
You get to the top finally, because you've thought about this for, like you said, there were 2 years previous to it. You get to the top. What feeling do you have? What are you thinking?
Well, when I got to the top, I was just happy to be there.
Because of the altitude, you aren't allowed to stay there very long, so you have to take it all in pretty quickly.
You were at 19,340 feet. You don't have a lot of oxygen. You're not thinking as clearly as you normally would be thinking. So I was very tired, but when I got to the top, I looked around and I saw the glacier, and I saw the sign that said Mount Kilimanjaro and how many feet, and then I looked at our other people that were with us in our group and the tour guide, and I said, Emmanuel, we've made it, and he just laughed.
Snapped a few pictures, and then it was time to go.
Then I looked back as we were walking. I looked back up at the top, and I thought, I can't believe it.
See, that's amazing to me. Just because you set a goal doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
That very last climb, the ascent to the summit, was very hard. And I think I realized that when I made it to the top, that was a pretty good feat for me.
Especially when you find out Diane absolutely hates to camp.
You know, I don't know how anybody can get used to sleeping in a tent, so I don't.
After making the climb, Diane spent the next 3 months touring through 4 different countries to personally visit all of the missions to which she donated the money she raised for the climb. Diane even ended up meeting JC, the girl she sponsored through the Christian Foundation for Children and Aging during her trip.
And met one day for lunch, and then we spent the afternoon together, and then the next morning we spent the time together.
Diane says this vision board played a huge part in helping her make the journey.
I just took a large board, I put on the things that I wanted to accomplish in the next 2 or 3 years, and every day I walk past that. So it gives me a visual has me recollect, okay, what is it that you wanted to do? What did you say you're going to do? And so it's a way of putting your dreams into goals.
And if Diane is any example, it works.
And I would encourage anybody, I don't care what age they're at, they might be in their 20s and they may be dreaming to go to Europe for 6 weeks and backpack. Who knows with it, but can they do it? Absolutely. Will they have to make sacrifices? Certainly.
But Diane says if she's any example, those sacrifices are well worth it.